Here we are on beautiful Jones Street.
You saw Ted Jones.
Okay, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Ted Jones World Podcast. Today, on the episode, we're going to be talking about a lot of things. Do I know exactly what we're going to fully talk about on each subject? No, I don't know, but I'm so hungry today. If you guys have listened to the podcast before, you know that I don't usually eat before the podcast, and today is no difference. It's 2 p.m. That's usually when I've been recording. It's like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. New York City's getting a little bit colder. And the thing is, with the weather changing, you never really think about how dramatic it's going to change. You know, like today it's like 50 degrees, but it's super windy and it feels like it's 32 degrees. But for the most part, in summer, you're like, yeah, you know, I'll handle the New York City winter. It's not going to be bad. And then in the winter, you're like, oh, waiting for the summer. That's the beautiful thing about having the weather change all the time. You know, you have something to look forward to theoretically, but when it starts to get really cold and you're like, all right, I need 2 sweatshirts, 2 jackets. You're like, all right, let's figure it out here. And then also it's like you become a little bit more antisocial unless you're inside. I think that was a weird way to put it. But throughout the spring and the summer and then parts of the fall, you really do see a lot more people outside walking around. And now that it's becoming a little bit colder, you don't see as many faces on the street. You know what I'm saying? You guys know what I mean? Mostly everything moves inside. And then it being the middle of November right now. And oh my gosh, by the way, if you guys are listening to this on Thursday, yesterday, November 13th, was my birthday. Today, as I'm recording this, tomorrow is my birthday. So I've turned 33 years old. That's crazy to say out loud. I don't think I've said it out loud yet. But do I feel 33 years old? No, I don't think so. I do feel young. And by young, I definitely feel like I'm late 20s-ish. So maybe I've cut out a few years of my life. But I think it's also because I do feel good. You know, I had maybe like 2 to 3 weeks where like my foot was hurting for a little bit, but I feel good now. And that's what happens in life. You know, you'll get some of these things where you have pain in a certain particular part of your body, but that's life. You know what I mean? But okay, anyway, I'll get back to me turning 33, but the winter months for New York City stand-up, like this past weekend, all the shows that I did 7 shows, all of them were sold out. And I think that people now, like November and December, really get the bug where they're like, okay, now it's like a different type of season. Everyone's a little bit more fired up. They're like, oh, let's go out and do this particular thing. But then once January and February come, that's really when people hunker down and stay inside. And people are like, all right, it's just too damn cold outside, which I understand being in a place like New York, but that's a time when people go down to those warmer locations and people who live in the warmer climates can really enjoy it. And being I remember my freshman year of high school, I was homeschooled for tennis. For those of you who didn't know, I would go out to San Diego and I would play tennis there a week out of the entire month. And that's where they have the best weather in the entire country. I would say that San Diego is one of those places that doesn't really have consequences for having that great of weather. You know, like in LA, you think about earthquakes and maybe think about the smog, but San Diego, that's a place that I feel like that place is underrated. I will say that. Maybe there's not as much to do as in LA or New York City, but it's an underrated place. I'd say if you live in San Diego, you give me my props for noticing that. But yeah, San Diego, a place with amazing weather. And then, you know, we're approaching that time in New York City where it's just going to get bitterly cold. And it lasts probably like realistically 12 weeks. You would like to think that it lasts like 10 weeks. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's got to be longer than 12 weeks, bruh. So probably around 16 weeks, that 4-month mark. Because it starts realistically like the middle of December where it starts to get brick out. It's brick outside. And then it goes till, like middle of April. But then also you can compare, you could say that like the beginning of December it happens and then April. And then you have some days where it's not insanely brick out, but then you have some other days where you're like, why do I even live here? And you get a little bit colder, but that's the beautiful thing about New York. Okay, let's get back to me turning 33 and how I feel about it, okay? Because I think maybe, I don't know, who knows? Maybe that's something you guys would want to hear about. I do feel, like I said before, I do feel like I'm in my late 20s. I feel like I have lived a good amount of life. And I've lived a few lives. I think I will say that. I can remember back to middle school when I had a very difficult time in school. And I was always the kid who was in like the slower math class. Reading comprehension was insanely hard for me. And the reason reading comprehension was so hard for me is because I didn't want to read and then comprehend it. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's a very reasonable thing to say because whatever I was reading or whatever the teacher put, whatever book it was, I just never wanted to read it. And then a way that I would overcompensate for not reading and not comprehending is like a kid would ask a question. I'd be like, oh, I was going to ask the same question when clearly I probably didn't read the book. Or if I did, I'd skim it. That's why I always needed a tutor. And I think now that I've grown to an older age, I realize that if I'm not interested in something, I have a tough time focusing on it. Now, that's a form of ADD, maybe ADHD, but that goes for saying like a lot of people who have tough time in school, it's because that they're not focused on it. They don't care about the topic at hand, which is very valid. And in high school, I had a difficult time too. Middle school and high school were very tough for me on the school subject, education, learning purpose. I had a tutor throughout middle school and high school. And it became a point where, no joke, guys, like 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, I would have a tutor because I had such a difficult time in school. And even when I paid attention and I really tried my hardest, I think that there was just a part of my brain that was like, dude, we're not doing this. I don't want to do it. And there would be times where like if I got a B- on the test, like everybody in the whole squad would be fired up. My family would be like, oh my God, Ted, great job. Or Ted Jones or Teddy, great job. You got a B- on your test. Even the tutor would be fired up if I got a C. And it's crazy to think that when you're that age in middle school and high school, you think so much of the next, whatever it is, 2 to 3 years of your life matters. Like even before I went to college, I remember I was like 15, 16 years old. I was like, where am I going to go to college? I don't want to go to like a random school that nobody's heard of. It's just difficult. High school, it was difficult for me. Middle school was difficult for me. And I feel like life didn't start like becoming more enjoyable until like the last probably 5 or 6 years when I focused on things that I really wanted to focus on. And that's when I think that was like the fourth arc of my life, where I was working in real estate for 6.5 years and I wanted that to become super enjoyable for me because theoretically, you know, if your dad is your boss, then you could become the boss in just X amount of years. It's just a timing thing. Where now I'm doing something that I really love to do. And while I realize that it's hard work, I'm enjoying the hard work. And I think that there's something to be said for enjoying the harder times. And I'm talking from an experience that I'm in it right now. You know what I mean? And if you guys are listening and watching and you are going through a harder time, but you're enjoying it, I think that makes it more valid. And also people before me, you know, I watch these TikTok clips and Instagram clips. Maybe it sounds stupid that I'm quoting them, but people say that when you're working on things and you're enjoying it, that is going to be more beneficial for you in the long run. And it's interesting to talk about and think about because you never really hear people discuss them enjoying what they're doing right at that particular moment, but it kind of sucks because you're at the time where you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this stuff. Is it going to work? Yeah. I think that's where I'm at right now. I got to be completely transparent with you guys. I'm being vulnerable. Who is ringing my bell? I haven't ordered anything. I don't know. Maybe he's at what's it called? The exterminator. Let's see who it is. Who is it? Yeah, it was definitely just like it was probably just the Amazon or the package guy ringing all the buzzers. So he could drop off something. Or hopefully it wasn't someone who just buzzed into the apartment and then is stealing all the packages. That's something that happens in New York City. People just go and ring every single buzzer until they get inside and then they'll just take the packages. That's why you definitely need at least a virtual doorman in New York City in every apartment building for the most part, rather than a doorman. For those of you who don't know what a virtual doorman, you just put like a thing on the wall that has a camera, and then they can ring whichever. If you live in apartment 3F, they'll ring it, and then you could see it on your phone. That's the beautiful thing about technology, man. Technology changing the world for the better. I think that there are obviously many setbacks for technology because people will be so sucked in and locked in to their phone where it'll take over. And that's something that also I can recommend, is that when I go to the gym, I'm going to the gym like 3 or 4 times a week. Maybe I'll go on a few runs, whatever it is. I don't bring my phone with me. And I think that helps. Now, while music obviously is a booster for mood and motivation, and if you're listening to certain things, I do think that that particular time that I just leave my phone at home, it helps. It just helps. It helps take a break where I disconnect for a moment. Just because being in the comedian entertainment industry, you have to be connected so much of the freaking time. And I feel like ever since I've been doing this full time, the last it's approaching 4 years, I've just been connected all the time. And I try and do my best where if I'm not doing something productive on my phone, I won't be scrolling. But like even before bed, I'll admit, like I'll be in bed and I'll be scrolling whatever it is, one of the social media apps for 20 minutes before I even put my phone down. There was a period of time where I wasn't even charging my phone, and I would just go into bed with like 10% battery and then just scroll until my phone dies. That can't be great for you. And then sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I still will scroll. The world is changing. It's changing so fast. Things are completely different than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There's so much more emphasis on an online presence than there was 5 years ago. So what's going to happen again in 5 years? You know, like you can run into somebody on the street who has 1 million followers on all these apps, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, you know what? I want to capitalize on this. I'm going to start doing stand-up comedy. But realistically, in order for you to do an hour of stand-up comedy, even the legends before have spoken about how you really have to be doing stand-up for years before you can even put together your first hour. Most comics don't have an hour of comedy until they're at least 5.5, 6 years in. I myself would consider myself like I would consider myself 5.5, 6 years into comedy, and I don't think I have an hour right now. I would be comfortable for real going up on stage and doing, I'd say 40 minutes. I could stretch it out to 50 minutes with some things, but I would be comfortable doing 40 minutes on stage right now. So if somebody wanted to book me for 45 minutes, you let me know. But I do think within the next 3 to 5 months, I'll be comfortable doing 45 minutes on stage for sure. And then I would think within the next 12 months, I could do an hour. But I mean, it's taken a long time to get here. And I feel like every year I've gained like 10 solid minutes. Stand-up comedy, it takes a long time, you know? So it's not just like an overnight thing where you're able to sell out theaters, but it has become that because people with a social media presence can sell tickets. You know, if you have a million followers on a social media app, you can easily put 300 people in seats to come see you one particular time in any city in the United States. So there's a lot of emphasis now on keeping that balance, man. We're in a new time, as you guys know, 2024. I'd be interested to know what the corporate environment looks like now that a lot of people work from home. Not always, but there is kind of like the 4-day work week, where people are in the office 4 days and 1 day they're not, maybe even more than that. And people are looking for remote jobs more so than they ever were. And that's also because of 2020 and the impact that it left on people and being like, well, we don't necessarily need to go to an office. And then also you got all these office buildings in New York City, and a lot of them have fully vacant floors where it's just 25,000 square feet of vacant columns and people not in the office. The office environment definitely has to do with camaraderie, but also you can get that camaraderie on Zoom. You go get drinks, or you don't need to go into the office every single day. And I mean, that's just how I feel. I don't really know much about the office environment now, but I'm sure you guys would know better than me. But it just feels like over the last 5 years, things have changed so dramatically where it's like, it's going to be hard to tell where society will be in 2030 compared to 2025. When, if you thought about where we all were in 2020, do you remember people were saying, oh yeah, we're never going to be able to do handshakes again. We're going to have to wear masks all the time. Like, bruh. Can you imagine if people nowadays didn't do handshakes? I feel like handshakes were done for a year, but then they came back. Now it's just the most confusing thing ever being a bro. Like when you go in for a handshake, you're like, all right, are we doing the dap to the hug? Are we doing just a dap, hold on to the dap? Are we doing a slap, then hug? Are we doing fists? Are we doing a full handshake? Being a guy is tough in that sense, because girls, for the most part, when they meet each other, they're either going in for a hug or a handshake. Or if you're really good friends, maybe you go in for the kiss on the lips. No, girls aren't doing that. Unless, I'm wilding. I'm wilding out here, man. I am just kidding. But yeah, man. So looking back on the past year, I've had a great year. And I'm happy to be 33 years old as you guys are listening to this. I don't feel 33, but if I was speaking to myself 10 years ago and thinking about the age of 33, I'd be like, damn, you're old. But I think that also goes for saying, like, you don't feel a certain age. Like, I think once you turn each age, you don't really feel it. You just feel other people's judgment on you for turning that age. You know what I mean? Like, my parents had me and had another kid when they were 33 years old. Am I ready for a child just yet? I don't think so. Eventually, yeah, sure. There'll be a couple little Ted Joneses around, Tedina Joneses, if that's the girl version of Ted Jones, Tedina. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think things are pushing back a little bit more. I don't know why. Also, that is it because people are supposed to live longer that people are pushing life back like 5 years, right? I don't know. Like one of my best friends got married at 31, which is more so of a normal age. I think his wife is 30. Yeah, but it could be if you talk to my grandparents, grandma or grandmother, if you listen and what's up. But if you talk to them, they would consider getting married at 30 and 31 as a little bit late. When now I see 30 and 31-year-olds getting married. I'm like, all right, you guys sure you're getting married a little bit early? But no, I could see people getting married later now, but I don't know why that is. And I would say that maybe it's because people are going to be living longer, but who knows, man? Who knows? And you've obviously, if you guys have listened to a podcast before, we've talked about health and wellness a lot, but there were people who were living a lot longer thousands of years ago. There were tales of people who lived hundreds of years. And is that because of diet or human evolution? You don't really know, but there is not a lot of talk about, there is a lot of talk about, but there isn't enough talk about food and how it affects your length of life, especially over the last 50 years where the food products have become more prevalent in our lives because big pharma, big business, the FDA has become so huge and they're the ones selling us product. You know, we've moved far away from being a person who just picks the berries and bananas and eats avocados off the tree, you know, eating nuts and things like that. Like people, for the most part, when I tell people my diet, people bug out because as you guys know, I'm vegan. And if this is the first time you're hearing this, I'm sorry it's taken me freaking 20 minutes to tell you that. But there's so many things that have been affecting our food over the last 50 to probably 75 years that it's like, all right, we gotta start to awake here. Look through our third eye and see like what has really been affecting communities and making people perish at a younger age, you know? Because theoretically, if you're like 65 to 75 years old, you shouldn't be just dropping dead from heart disease or diabetes. Like you should be good. Food shouldn't be affecting how long you're living on an earlier scale, right? Like people should be living longer, man. People should be living longer. That's what I think. If assuming there's not a tragic accident, your health should allow you to live longer because we're able to adapt. We're able to adapt as humans. Today, like I said, it was the wind chill of 35 degrees. I was tarps off on the West Side Highway, bruh. And I just feel like the entire time, like in my mind, I was like, all right, I'm good. Like, I'm fine. I wasn't thinking about how freezing it was. I was just thinking about other things, like now that it's 2 p.m., people are like, oh, aren't you hungry? Aren't you starving? You didn't have breakfast? No, but I feel like you're able to adapt, right? Like our ancestors, if they weren't eating food every 12 hours, they were okay. They were locked in on looking for more food. They weren't like, I'm starving. They'd be like, all right, where's the next meal coming from? Let's lock in. Let's look over here. Is there food over here? Adapt into the world. That's what you gotta do. And I have all these signs all over my apartment. And it's like, oh, be positive, be this, be that. Don't be negative. We'll see if this all ends up working. Okay? Because in the moment, sometimes I'm like, I'm negative, but then I'm like, no, you gotta be positive. I hope to see if this works. And I'll continue the journey with you guys to let you know if it works. Because I have all these signs all over the place. I have shower notes. I have the most insane looking shower. I have like 50 notes to myself in the shower, just like being positive. Whatever it is. Just trying your best to do what you got to do. And that's the beautiful thing also about social media is that you can find these things on your fingertips. You don't have to go to the library and do reading comprehension. Because that's something that people don't really want to do. Okay? Nobody wants to be in Diane's 4th grade classroom on the rug doing division. Even though she was a great teacher, that was a moment I literally remember. I was like crying because I got sent to the carpet in the middle doing division with the blocks. And guess what? The last time I used division, maybe that's a bad example. Maybe I've used division previously, but I feel like more so you use multiplication and addition and subtraction a lot more than you use division. And I never took pre-calc, and I'm pretty sure I got an A in statistics in college because the 3 tests that we had, there was a guy sitting next to me who had the same freaking test. So I was like, all right, statistics. I don't know statistics. All right. Do I know plus and minus? Yeah, sure. But I don't even know what statistics is. I don't even know what the definition of it is. Not that saying you would need to know the definition of statistics to know it, but it's like calculus. And if you're going to be a calculations guy, sure. Never took an AP class. School was hard. But adapting to your circumstances is necessary. So you got to try in that particular environment. This has been an insane rant. And I don't really even know what what I'm referring to when I'm talking about adapting in a high school situation. But for those of you who didn't know, I did terribly in school. School is very difficult for me. And like I said in the beginning of the episode, it's really only been the past 5 or 6 years where I have felt like, okay, I'm good at something in particular, and it's cool when things are more difficult because I enjoy doing it. Whoa. And I think that's when you can get through the difficult things, is when you enjoy doing something. But here I am. I'm just a guy. Guys, thanks so much for listening to the Ted Jones World Podcast. I know we got through a lot of topics today. I'm 33 years old, and I'm super excited for the next 33 and then hopefully more years to come after that. 2025 approaching, New York City winter approaching. Guys, I hope you have a terrific day, morning, evening, whenever you're listening to this. Get home safe, and thanks so much for listening. I love you so. All right, guys, peace. Thanks. Bye.